So there's an element of Groundhog Day, isn't there, with crime reporting in Ireland, and certain family names come up over many, many years, too many years to mention, really, Eamon.
But for yourself now.
Well, but of course, the name Keane will always be associated with criminality in Limerick. And again, last week we had a member of the Keane family, Kieran Keane Jr., who had a number of 2 properties, was it, and 3 cars and a sum of cash seized under the Proceeds of Crime Act. And we heard, I suppose, details of what the Gardaí believe the level of criminality he's involved in.
Yeah, so it was a cab case again, proceeds of crime, and it was 3 houses in Limerick, all in Garryowen, and there was 3 vehicles involved as well. Nothing spectacular in terms of the vehicles. The Skoda Superb, I think, and was definitely one of them. And they were, and then there's 100 grand in cash in an AIB account. And this is somebody who never claimed the dole and never worked. There was no record really with revenue. The affidavit from the revenue officer in his regard was pretty short. And again, like, it kind of showed, I suppose, in one sense, a sophisticated attempt at laundering money, but also a fairly basic one as well, in that the pattern with the houses was basically to buy them, possibly under the counter, buy them at a low price, sometimes a damaged house, and then use cash to renovate them, and to leave them registered in the previous owner's name, so never actually registering the ownership.
Yeah.
And then renting them out either to associates or relatives, so that, it was basically, there were assets that could be of benefit to Kieran Keane Jr. or people that he knew.
Yeah.
And his name wasn't on it. So this was kind of an attempt, I suppose, to put a layer between him and the Criminal Assets Bureau to protect the money.
Yeah, it was kind of a step up from the old way. And of course, this presumably was done a number of years ago, where things have probably changed again. Obviously, Kieran Keane's partner, a woman called Laura Flanagan, who she is still in that house. Kieran Keane Jr. is described as being in Dubai, and she is basically making the case that that's a family home and he's not living there, and she has a entitlement to stay there. Yeah, now they're kind of co-respondents, so they were represented in court. There was counsel there for both, and like, I think initially in one of the affidavits from a cab officer was that Keane Jr. was living in Spain, and then there was another affidavit to say then he was told that he was actually living now in Dubai and had access to funds there. The judge regarded that as hearsay evidence. So he's between Dubai and Spain as far as is known. Yeah. But in the meantime, she's still at the house with 3 children at Clohan Avenue in Garryowen, which is one of the houses now. While the judge more or less gave power of receivership to CAB for the other 2 houses, the cars and the cash, he wants to have another hearing on Clohan House, because they want to go through what are we going to do with a family who are basically living in it. It's one of the few reasons, like, on the Constitution in Ireland, you're not being able to kick someone out of their family home. There is the legislation in the Proceeds of Crime Act does kind of cover that, and so you can actually seize a house from a family, but it has to be done so that the interests of justice are being served. So there was actually mention of a couple of previous cases, including one, the Calverts in Limerick, and the daughter of Dermot Calvert. They basically made an arrangement that she could stay on the house for another 9 years, because she had she was there with her children, including one with a serious medical issue. And again, Laura Flanagan had actually put in an affidavit, like in terms of the house and her situation, and about one of the children, having particular needs or whatever. So the judge said Judge Alex Owens, says that he is obliged to take these into account, and that the interests of justice have to be seen. So he said, like, the matter of appointing a receiver to this house would be, they go ahead at another hearing. But it was actually declared proceeds of crime in the meantime. It just means that CAB can't take control of it, in the normal proceeds. But they have to all go for a Section 4 application anyway. Okay. And of course, Laura Flanagan she's running a successful beauty business in Limerick. I think it's called House of K Aesthetics. Now, she previously appeared in the Sunday World, I think it was back in 2010, where a number of armed men basically broke into her house and tied her up. I think it's the same house in Garryowen, and basically got her to call in an attempt to get her to lure her partner, Kieran Keane Jr., back to the house. So he was a target, and that was believed to have been the McCarthy faction of the McCarthy-Dundon gang at the time. It was a very high-profile incident. She's obviously no involvement in any crime. As you said, he's sort of a respectable business owner. But I suppose it brings in, that incident brings in that old feud, and Kieran Keane Jr. is, of course, the son of Kieran Keane Sr., who was probably his murder. Is it one of the most infamous anyway of that feud? It's certainly a real sparking point. Was it 2000 or?
It's 2003 in January. And then you had the 5 men who were jailed for life then within the year, I think in early December 2003.
So tell us about that. Like he was kind of lured into a location.
Yeah, there was a kind of a parallel, I guess, to what happened to Miss Flanagan in 2010. As well as her partner Kieran Keane Jr. They also tried to get her to call Christy Keane Sr. His uncle to call to the house as well. You actually spoke to Sophie Keane at the time. I was stealing some of your copy there during the weekend, and she was telling you that they've gone through a lot, and of course it's scary. It said, but they wouldn't be interested in talking about it. They're just better off getting on with things.
And Sophie Keane would have been Kieran Keane Sr.'s widow.
That's correct. Yeah. But I suppose there was the echo of that, because what happened, this kind of famous double cross that the story is. That the Keane Collopys at that stage, they wanted the Ryans out of the way. So you had the two young Ryan brothers. There were Eddie Ryan and John Ryan's Kieran and Eddie Jr.
Yeah.
They wanted them out of the way, and the theory is that the Dundons were going to carry out this double murder, and it appeared that the 2 young men had been abducted, and there was a third guy who had been with them, was able to raise the alarm and all the rest of it, and Kieran Keane and Owen Tracy, also Owen Tracy Sr., so the 2 senior men, they were asked to turn up at the house, and they were expecting to find the bodies or the 2 young Ryans tied up or dead, but instead they were abducted, and then they were forced to try and attract other senior members of the gang to come and meet them. And when that didn't happen, Kieran Keane Sr. was shot dead, and Owen Tracy was stabbed several times and basically left for dead, but was able to kind of attract attention, or he was able to raise the alarm. He got medical attention. He survived, and he went on to be the star witness in the trial against the 5 men who were charged with Kieran Keane Sr.'s murder,
and ultimately sentenced to life. And one of those 5 would be Desi Dundon, who remains in prison, brother of Wayne and John. Very serious criminal figure in the city. And Owen Tracy would have been Kieran Keane's nephew. So obviously Kieran Keane died. He had a couple of sons at that stage. And this is Kieran Keane Jr., obviously, who's come before the courts almost 20 years later. Owen Tracy Sr. also had a couple of sons, and they've also come before the courts in recent times. Richard Tracy being one of them, and Owen Tracy Jr. being another.
Yeah, and really from the picture we're getting from some of the CAB documents this week is that Owen Tracy Jr. and Kieran Keane Jr. and his uncle Christy Keane are kind of seen as the 3 main leading members of the Keane faction, which is really very much a clan-based criminal organisation. And what we saw with some of the criminal asset stuff about, for instance. Like Sophie Tracy was actually Owen Tracy's sister, was in one of the houses, was living in one of the houses that had been targeted by CAB, and she was recently jailed for her part in drug dealing along with her brother Owen Tracy Jr. Who's kind of seen as he's described as the guy overseeing the street sales. And he was actually he was kind of he was caught in surveillance, and this was the case he recently got imprisoned for. It was the same one that Stephanie was done for as well. But apparently she's been released after quite a short time. There wasn't room for her in prison. She was released, I think, after a very short period, despite being sentenced to 18 months. But she was in one of these houses in Garryowen that are being targeted by CAB. Well, that have been targeted by CAB. that Kieran Keane Jr. was the beneficial owner of. And again, you had another property, another set of relatives, which be his cousin Warren Hare, who is also a convicted drug dealer as well. His mother Sandra would be Christy Keane's sister, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Just you have to do kind of the whole family tree, and even the house at Clan Avenue, that was actually registered in the name of Daniel Tracy, who again would have been Owen Tracy Sr.'s another son of his, who wasn't involved in gangland, but he was shot dead. He was shot dead by a relative of a man that his brother Richard had been part of a gang who had beaten him to death, and Daniel unfortunately paid the ultimate price in terms of revenge for that.
Yeah.
But again, I suppose it highlights, his murder, I suppose, highlights kind of the internecine, close knit nature of kind of Limerick criminality. And even the cab case against Kieran Keane Jr. and Laura Flanagan kind of highlights that as well. That how tight they all are in working together. And all of this was kind of coming out of Operation Coronation in June 2020. I don't even remember at the time, but the guards, called in the army as part of the search operation.
Yeah.
And there was quite a number of kind of people, connected to the Keane gang who've since got criminal convictions, including the likes of the Hares that we mentioned, and Warren's wife Vicky as well got a suspended sentence, and his mother. But there was also a man called Dermot Plum McManus, who we've mentioned before. He was described as a close confidant of Christy Keane, and a lot of it is for relatively low levels of money. It's still 36,000 or 17,000.
Yeah.
These kind of sums of money stashed in socks or in coats. But again, it's all the money that makes the gang operate, and you can only assume that they have more assets outside of this jurisdiction, or out of the reach of the Criminal Assets Bureau. But there was also kind of, as well as the pattern of buying houses at low value, again there was this idea of, in one case, they bought a house which wasn't a target. Again, it was a fire damaged house in Carrickondlish, and that was done up, on behalf of Kieran Keane, all done for cash and sold off for a reasonable profit. And some of that money was what was in the bank account that was seized.
Yeah. So I mean, and also there was ties to car businesses as well. That was also being used as a route to launder money. And I suppose you can see it's a very close connected family unit. There was Richard Tracy as well, I think is currently being come before the courts. He would be another cousin. He's been prosecuted for money laundering, I believe, and pled guilty in the Special Criminal Court. So is this a fatal blow to the Keane gang, you think?
I don't think so, to be honest, unfortunately. There is, in a sense, another layer even above the Keanes, in that, while they control, I suppose, the retail end of the business, and they do have their own international connections, and some of it is through, various relations, but there are other people based in Spain that are, closely connected to them.
Yeah.
That still have yet to be named in the media. Yeah. It just, we haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
It's all, to some extent, it's business as usual. I mean, a lot of these people it's not the first time they've been, they've been convicted. I mean, and again, even if you look at like the separate operation that was against Bone Motors, that I know I've often go on about, but that was a huge blow to gangs on both sides of the divide. I mean, that was being used like this. Basically, it was a car business that was set up solely with the raison d'etre to launder money for the drugs gangs through this bogey car business. And there was millions going through it. It was, it went from it within a short time it was making 9 million a year in profits. So that gives you an idea. And even say, like, like people related to Keane Jr. in the cab cases, they were suggesting there was a list in the cab papers of the different drug seizures over 20 years, and it amounted to about 8 million. Yeah. So I mean, that sounds kind of relatively small, but like I think the biggest one was 2.5 million. Yeah. But there's a constant battle going on, and there is a certain amount of successes, and they do take quite a lot of drugs off the streets, but obviously quite a lot get through, and a lot of the money doesn't get found either.
And of course, these gangs that are well organised, they built in the presumption that a certain percentage is going to go, and that you can't rely on everything not being seized. Now he's over in Dubai, but there's no talk of him coming back for this case, or when does the final decision be made on the house in Garryowen?
Well, I suppose with the cab cases, it can go on a bit, as you know. So I mean, what happened last week was cab were looking for the Section 3 order, which is to declare the assets, the proceeds of crime. They're already frozen at this stage. Yeah. So I mean, usually the cars have already been sold and the money is in escrow account or whatever. And all that's frozen and it doesn't go anywhere until the receiver is appointed. So that's what happened last week, that they were now declared the proceeds of crime. Yeah. So they'll have to apply again then to actually transfer the money then to the state, which is basically liquidizing, whether it's selling off the houses or moving the money from the various frozen accounts into the exchequer. It all goes back to the Minister of Expenditure. Yeah. That's the way it works. And they just thought they have to sell everything at the highest price they can get. They're bound by law to do that. That's why you often say, well, why don't the community get something back, like some of these drug dealers' houses? Why can't they be used for helping homeless people or for a drug counselling services or anything like that? But they're not allowed to do that. They have to put it on the market and get the highest market price for them, and they're obliged to do that. And it takes a bit of time, and they can. It's up to 7 years before the assets can often be fully transferred as well, depending on the case. Yeah. But that's the maximum. But sometimes it can be extended a little bit longer. And it looks like in this case that the judge seems to be open to hearing arguments that are going to allow him to do this in terms of the house where Laura Flanagan is still living with the 3 children. Well,
we'll keep covering them and keep coming back to it, Eamon, and it's often very interesting details gets filled out as we go through them.
We'll keep an eye out, Niall.
We will, Eamon. Thanks very much.
And thank you, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.